Yes, started.
Double check on your side.
Yep.
Yep. And the issue.
Yes. Yep.
Instagram's giving me an issue right now. I'm going to make you co-host so you can add people, okay, Gobin?
Sure.
And make sure I'm live on all platforms.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Iven Vian here, the Department Ninja Warrior. Excited for you to be able to join me today on our Monday afternoon tactic talk. And as you go ahead and watch live here on the various social media platforms, if you have a question or anything, I will be asking for questions or throughout the presentation today, and give you opportunity to ask questions throughout. If you do have a question, go just raise your hand and let me know if you have a question. But today I want to share with you some of the keys to success when it comes to how to prepare for a KPI call when it comes to working with a property management company. And the first thing I want to talk about here is, before we even get into how to prepare for one, is this idea of being proactive versus reactive when it comes to working with property management companies. A lot of the reports that we have access to and a lot of the data is from a reactive state where we made a decision previously and we're reviewing the outcome of the data and what we previously implemented. But the key is to understand how the decisions we're going to make today will affect the future from a proactive standpoint. And so a lot of what I want to share with you is how we can be looking at the KPI reports and all the access to all the various data from more of a proactive place versus a reactive place, so that we can get ahead of the curve and make sure that we're not just reacting all the time to the operations of whatever property is that you're overseeing and managing. And so with that, I'm going to bring up some KPI reports as well, and we'll kind of start digging into it and be talking about it. And so give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Welcome, Nick and Lynn. Good to see you guys here in Zoom. Thanks for joining. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So when it comes to preparing, it's really, really important that, one, when we're asset managers, we're not just people reviewing financial data. We're actually implementing a plan and taking the data and causing action to happen, right? We're actually leading the execution overall with implementing the business plan. And this term asset management, a lot of it comes from the financial space, where I work with financial managers or asset managers on the lending side and the equity side, where we send them reports and they see what the performance was in the previous month. But us as asset managers, we need to understand, again, what we're doing today and how will that affect tomorrow. And the only one way we are able to do that is if we keep a consistent cadence and rhythm in reviewing the data. where you can see the trends and the shifts in the data. And also when you're working with people on a daily basis, weekly basis, you can see the different decisions they're making and how they're implementing the game plan overall that will affect the result for you and your property. At a minimum, I'm looking at the data every day, but just before a KPI call, I like to pull the reports just about an hour prior. I review all the reports. I make note of all the talking points and questions to ask during the KPI call. I don't like having KPI calls where it's just a reciting of the information, especially when like you have the manager um, just going through the numbers and filling out the KPI sheet and reciting all the information. To me, I can read the numbers and I know what the numbers are telling me. That doesn't really help me. It's really about understanding between the numbers, what the actual data is telling you is where the most effective KPI calls are. And so I want to come up with that game plan and understand what those numbers are and what those questions, those focal points that I want to have well in advance before even talking to the property management company or the manager ahead of the call. All right, got all my reports up here now. Bear with me one second, and I'm going to show you my KPI sheet here as well. And so with that, there's a lot of different reports that I pull. I have my own KPI sheet. I will be touching a little bit on that. You can see the name of all the various reports here: the cumulative property status report, availability report, delinquency, accounts payable, rent roll, LTO, which stands for lease trade out report for us, T12, profit and loss detail, trailing 12, unpaid invoices, so on and so forth. Some of the key things that you want to look at, some of the key things is the availability report, delinquency report, accounts payable, and also accounts receivable, and the T12. I'm reviewing that well in advance, and I'm looking for shifts in the data, as well as I want to understand what I'm going to do today, how that's going to affect tomorrow, okay? And first and foremost then is going to be the availability report. To me, the availability report is the drumbeat of the property. It's the pulse of the property, and it tells me the different ins and outs that are going on with the property in terms of how many people are moving in, how many people are planning on moving out, and what's the overall status of the property. And I review this on a weekly basis and helps me again keep an overall pulse of the property. So before even jumping into the KPI report, I pull up the availability report, and it may look different depending on what type of property management software your property management company is using, or what they may actually call it. Typically, it is called an availability report. And the availability report is broken up in a few different sections. We have the vacant section, the notice to vacate section, the vacant lease section, and the notice to vacate lease and under eviction section. And so starting with the top, we have this vacant section. And as the name implies, these are all the units in that one particular point in time of December 19th, when all the units are vacant. And I'm just going to walk you through exactly what I'm looking for and see what the questions are that I may want to ask when I'm actually on the KPI call. And there may be justifiable reasons why the numbers are what they are, but I still want to make sure I understand. So the first thing I want to point out to is actually here on the days vacant. If the longer a unit sits unrented, the less money you're making, right? And so obviously you want to understand why a unit is not being rented. Here, 62 days is a long time, 102 days is a long time, but the data might not actually show that. So you have to ask the question. In this case, this particular property, we had a tenant, a long-term tenant, which is a lot of interesting things that goes on in real estate, but she was not the cleanest person at times. And I guess, unfortunately, a lot of cockroaches built up. And so we had to get the unit properly cleaned. It just took longer to make the unit ready. So I made note of that. Here, 102 days, there's a lot of cabinet work that needed to be done. And I got these answers after talking to the manager real time on the KPI call. But you want to make sure these days vacant, if there's a large number there, to address that, to make sure that there's a justifiable reason. Otherwise, it should be no more than, say, 7 to 15 days, depending on what time of the year and what the season is. Also, the date available. I make sure that they put in the correct date available when that unit is going to be ready and in light of when you're going through a renovation. And that is a key thing there is that if you have a whole interior unit renovation project occurring and you're delivering units in a predictable manner, those dates available need to be reflected on the availability report because your leasing agent pulls availability report up in the system to determine what units are available to rent. And if the date available is not accurate, they're not going to rent that unit in time. And have been cases where you find that a unit's been made available, but not reflected here on the availability report. So it's literally sitting there on the property, not getting rented. And it may have been ready for 15 days, but no one knew about it because we didn't have good tracking systems. So you need to make sure you have the date to be accurate there. And there are a lot of times too where a unit is not ready and it's shown to be ready here on the vacant side of this report. And so you need to make sure, again, if it's ready, it's ready. If it's not ready, it's not ready. And that gets updated here on this report. Additionally, if the unit is fully renovated or is updated, the nomenclature in the name itself has to reflect that, because then the market rent rate should reflect the actual condition of the interior unit, the level of upgrade of the interior unit, and that needs to be implemented right here under the nomenclature. So you have to have a good tracking system on the construction side so that all the correct data is easily transferred over to the availability report so that the leasing team can go out and lease units when the units are made available or not. So I'm doing a glance here and then I'm making sure that I truly understand that what the information is telling me and everything is accurate and correct. And I always say if you're going to have a number in there or a date or a piece of information, it might as well be correct, or why have it there in the first place at all. So that's a little bit of it there about the vacant section there. And then we have this notice to vacate section. And this is where this is going to tell me what something's going to happen in the future. And this is where I'm talking about being proactive versus reactive. And there's another term we use in apartment operations called exposure, where we have a lot of units are going to come up to be vacant, and which will then expose this property to potentially have lower occupancy, in which the biggest killer in this business is vacancy loss. So I want to manage it, meaning we see that we have a lot of units coming up to be vacant, and we want to then make sure we get ahead of that and implement more marketing or be more aggressive on getting more bodies in, so on and so forth, so that we can keep our occupancy a lot higher when all these people move out. We already have a team of people or a bunch of people ready to move back in. And this is where, again, you can catch a lot of this vacancy exposure issues by just paying attention to this section. Additionally, if you see a lot of vacancy about to happen, you want to make sure that your renewals reflect that and you're not as aggressive in some cases, because you know you're going to have a lot of vacancy loss, and you want to make sure that again, you maybe are not as aggressive on your rent renewals so that you can manage your vacancy loss. So I'm going in here and I'm taking a look and I'm just making sure that I have awareness of that. And also I'm making sure that I understand what are the various reasons. And if there's anything we could have controlled to prevent any notice to vacate, then we go here and address that. Historically, on Class C assets, Class B value add, you typically have about a 50 to 60% trade out anyways. And this property is in line with that. But still, I'd still want to address every single unit on an individual basis. And then we look at vacant lease, which I really like because obviously it's lease, or this notice to vacate lease, which a unit is noticed to vacate, it's still occupied, but they already released it. Again, that's going to help me with my future, being proactive, looking at my future exposure and making sure I minimize that exposure. And then we have our evictions popping up here on this as well. So Lynn, do you have a question?
I do. I have a couple of questions. One, just curious, like I see your prior rent is often higher than the market rent. Is
Mm-hmm.
there a reason for that? Or, I mean, that's awesome. Um,
Well, no, actually, it's not. This is not awesome. Well, big picture, market year-over-year rent rates are declining. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom,
Oh, okay.
right? So this unit was rented for it was getting rented for $1,600 at one point in time when at the peak of our rent rates. But what happened is all this exposure is starting to happen where delinquency is kicking in because a lot of the COVID money ran out and a lot of these property management companies leased up all their units, bringing in these tenants and hooking them up to the COVID money. The COVID money ran out. And then we have to evict all these people out now. Now there's all these people in a market, in an entire market, submarket, all these people getting evicted. When that happens, it brings down your vacancy or it brings down your occupancy. And then if you have more vacancy, you have to lower your rents to fill the property back up. So
Mhm.
all
Yeah,
this
that makes
delinquency
sense.
out there, it pushes all these bodies out on the street. You have lower occupancy, it automatically lowers the market rent overall and as an asset class. So that's what's going
Right.
on. Now, what
Okay. And then
is
my
that?
second question is when you have these units coming up for renewal, what kind of standard procedure? Do they reach out to the tenant at least 2 months in advance or 3 months in advance just to see if they're wanting to renew? Like, what does that look like?
Mhm. Yeah, 90 days in advance, we send out
Okay.
notices. We want a response 60 days in advance. Before we
Okay.
send out notices, us as an asset management team, in conjunction with the property management company, we are going to look at every single lease renewal on their current rate, market rate, and see what the bump may be or decline may be in order to what we're going to put on that notice to send back out. And this is so critical that we go through this step line by line by line, and we look at every single comparison to make sure we don't overexpose ourselves. For example, we have a lot of notices to vacate here in the winter season, and we also have a decline in rent rates. Do we want to be aggressive on renewals that we're going to implement 90 days in advance to these lease termination dates? The answer would be no, because there's a lot of high aggressive renewals. Most likely they're not going to renew, which further will exacerbate our vacancy issue because even more people are not going to renew because we're too aggressive on the rent rates. And so that's where I'm being proactive, I'm looking in the future, and I'm correlating that with already the expected people that are going to leave in the future. And I've determined where my
Mhm.
market rent should be in order to minimize my vacancy loss.
Okay. Thank you.
Great questions. All right. Okay, this is just one sheet, and I'm getting a little more detail. I probably should to keep things moving along. I just kind of want to keep it high level too, the best I can. Next is delinquency. You want to be reviewing delinquency, and this property is under 2%. The problem with this property still don't have a payment culture quite in line with being fully collected in the beginning of the month, but like I said, too, there was a lot of delinquency that hit the books, and a lot of people, Class C assets, have a lot of delinquency they're working through and trying to work through the eviction process to get them off the books. But you do want to review the delinquency report. Biggest thing for me is I want to make sure the status reflects if they're delinquent or not, and I want to look at the notes. Every single person that's delinquent needs to have notes, needs to have an action plan to make sure that we're rectifying the delinquency issue. And this is where us as asset managers have to emphasize this on an ongoing basis and to not allow any leniency when it comes to delinquency. It's so critical, so vital. And so I'm seeing if there are these notes, and if there's no notes, or if there's no notes, I'm going to make note of that. I'm going to call it out. I want to make sure we have an action plan for every single person on the delinquency report. The T12, of course, we want to look at that. And I'm looking at shifts. I'm looking at trends. I'm looking at increase, decrease, unfavorable, favorable variances on income statement side. But on the T12, I'm looking from month over month. So what is the trend? Is anything big that catches my eye? Here we had a decrease in bad debt, which is good. Because like I said, we're cleaning up the bad debt with this property and as well as the bad debt other income section there. But I'm looking for big shifts. And this is a big shift, 37 to 52. What's going on? And I look up here, oh, because we had other income of almost $15,000, which every December we have a cell tower. The cell tower company pays us $15,000. So we have to have understandings and reasons why there are shifts. And if we don't know, then that's when we ask the question on the KPI call. But we should typically know the answers to a lot of these questions already because we're already keeping up with the pulse of the property and we're constantly reviewing and looking at the data. And just by constantly reviewing and looking at the data, you pick up the pulse and you understand where the shifts, what are the causes for the shifts. So that's delinquency, that's trailing 12. Then again, you can look at income statement, which is income statement. Why don't I see you? Income statement. Come back to that. I come back. One thing we do is the lease trade out report. This is an internal report that we've created on our own, and we've been able to systemize it with our own macros where we can sync up some data and understand every single trade out. And one thing that I do here is that I look at every single lease trade out and I understand what that trade out number is compared to the overall rent rates that we set and if we're hitting market rent rates or not. And sorry about the size. I want to make this bigger for you guys so you can see it a little bit better. And my shortcut stopped working, so I got to manually do that. All right, here we go. So we have, for example, these two people that have vacant leased unit. They haven't moved in just yet. What was the prior rent? What's the current rent that we renewed them at or hit them at? So you can see the market is trending down. It is trending down. And this is how you can maintain pulse of a market. Like I said, our year-over-year rent is declining. Read all the data, and this right here is the report that supports the data. We read these big CoStar reports, Marcus and Millichap reports, and I'm not denying it because I'm seeing it at the property level. When I look at every single lease that is written, every single renewal that is written, and I see that we have a decrease, and it is what it is because the market is that, then the market's declining. And that is data then you can actually filter back into your underwriting for this current year. But I look at every single lease. This cumulative property status report is really cool. It's a big picture report. I'm looking at that. I'm reviewing that data. Box score is a really cool tool as well. It tells you the individual unit data and how many you have available. You can look at applications, renewals, look at all your different marketing data right there. And again, you just glance at every single piece of information, priming yourself with all the data ahead of going into the call. So that when you go into the call, it's not just a reciting of information. Again, I'm looking at, we use Knox CRM. I'm looking at all the different calls that we've got, missed calls, answered calls on the marketing side of things, activity. I'm looking at leads, prospects, follow-ups, Facebook, and where all the leads are coming from. You want to look at your marketing data as well. Probably going to downgrade on some of our CoStar spend, but it's one of those necessary things you need to have as well. Just got to have some exposure. I'm seeing where all my leads are coming from the marketing side, and a lot of my focus now is really on the marketing side. AP summary, we want to make sure you look at that and know that you have enough cash to pay for all your bills. Expiring leases, maintenance status report is very important. A lot of this ties back into renewals. If you don't respond to your maintenance requests in a timely fashion, a lot of people are not going to renew. New and renewed leases. It ties back into the new and renewed leases is the report of actually new and renewed leases. Profit. Here we go. Profit and loss. This is where all the favorable, unfavorable variances are in line with the budget that we set forth for the property management company. And again, you have to have driving factors and understand why you have a favorable or unfavorable variance and come up with those answers on the call. So once I review all that data, then I have my own KPI sheet, and it's very simple. Honestly, it's really about, for me, is understanding month over month and year over year kind of data to help me overall track the progress of a property. And I'm skimming through it. This top section comes from the availability report. I've already reviewed that and kind of understand that as a whole, but I want to look at the ins and outs and what my projected numbers are going to be from a future standpoint. So I'm looking at that current lease number It's what we're going to be in this case by the end of the month. It's where we currently are. So we implement all the ins and outs, probably going to end up around 93%. Number on housing, this is important because I don't want to get too overexposed, and it's not Section 8. There's assistance money you can receive through the county, through the city. I don't want to be overexposed on that, so I'm tracking that. I'm looking at my renewals overall and my renewal percentages and make sure it's staying strong there. And like I said, I'm still about 60%. So overall, managing that pretty well. I'm looking at my collections and all my income side of things and understanding where I'm going to end up by the end of the month, as well as how much cash I have available. I'm looking at my make readies and understanding my exposure there so that I'm never bottlenecking on available units that I have. And if I see that, again, this is another piece where if you have a lot of NTVs, notice the vacates coming up, obviously you're going to need to make those units ready. And if you have a lot of work orders coupling with a lot of units you need to make ready, you can pre-position a solution well in advance, meaning bringing in outside support. Maybe the property management company will bring in another maintenance person to help do some internal make readies. Or if you even get way, way behind, if you have a lot of work orders, a lot of issues, and maybe you have to bring on a third party to do make readies or do some interior updates and so on and so forth. So it's really, again, if you can look at INTVs, you can see how many make readies you have and correlate that with how many crews, you can see if any potential bottlenecks. You can prevent those bottlenecks from happening and put in solutions to prevent that. I'm looking at marketing. A lot of this marketing comes from the marketing reports I've already reviewed. And again, all this is just aggregated in one spot where I'm looking at month over month, and I can watch the trends and see how I end up in this particular week with this month compared to how I was in December on the previous month. So those are the reports, and I'm looking at all these various reports. And when I actually hold the meeting, I'm reviewing the data. How I do it on most of my properties, I'm reviewing the data. I'm already analyzing the data. The managers should know the data. So really a discussion on action items and tracking those action items and staying ahead of any type of tasks. And a lot of the keys to success as an asset manager is being very well organized on all the various tasks and continuing to review those tasks. I use Monday.com, plenty of tools. You can easily just use a Google Sheets, track all your tasks, and make sure you follow up with all your tasks, and make sure you know who owns each of these tasks and put suspense dates on those tasks and keep each of us and everyone accountable so we fulfill those tasks in a timely fashion. And if you continue to do this on a repetitive basis and stay consistent in your process, the manager catches wind of how you like to operate, what things you're looking for, and they will become more prepared and be well prepared for the meeting so you actually get something out of it versus just reciting information. You can spend more time on drilling down and finding solutions to shore up a lot of these gaps. If we have a vacancy loss issue, let's really drill down and understand why. If we have a delinquency issue, understand why. Accounts payable, cash management issue, understand why. And then you can draw action items from that. I find then this overall to be a lot more effective way to manage a KPI call and to get a more effective meeting in having a KPI call. So that is all that I have for you guys today. Any other questions? Govind, do you see anyone out there in social media world, all the various channels with any questions?
Let me check here. Um, I think we do not have any questions. Some comments are there, but that's not related to the questions there.
Okay. Delinquency issue, understand why. Okay. Alrighty then. Well, I will be here every Monday at 12 o'clock to provide you ongoing updates, insights, tools, and tactics on all things asset management, apartment operations. Thanks for attending today. For those that are not aware, come join me on my Facebook group, Apartment Ninja Warriors, and you get, again, ongoing content on all things asset management. And that is all. You guys have a great day. See ya.
Thanks, Ivan. Bye.